Thank you for tuning in to the GSMC Basketball Podcast presented by the GSMC Sports Network. I am your host, Nelson, and as you can see, I am back home, meaning that my upload speed is finally running silky smooth and I don't have to worry about, any sort of, connection issues that are going to be happening for those of you guys that are on the live segment. Obviously, those of you guys on the podcast segment, you guys won't even have a problem because you're not going to see any of that. You're not going to witness any of that, all that stuff. Now, it was a pretty big day here in the United States. For one, there was a lot of news that happened over the weekend. There was the Copa America. That stuff was going on. And as well as the Euro Cup. That stuff was also going on. So if you guys are interested in knowing the results of that sport, we do have a soccer podcast. The host for the podcast is Emran, so go ahead and tune in to that podcast because I watch those games. I know I'm supposed to be Mr. Basketball, things of that nature, but I was watching football, soccer, however you want to call it, and it was pretty fun. Obviously, the results, Argentina ended up winning and Spain ended up winning as well, but if you want more insight on that, go ahead and check out the soccer podcast. But let's talk basketball. So for the first segment, we're going to talk about Jalen Brunson and his ridiculous pay cut with the Knicks because, he could have made this amount of money, but instead decided to take $100 million less. And then in the second segment, we are going to be talking about Team USA and a change in their starting lineup in response to, an exhibition game that they're going to be playing later at 12 o'clock at night, or at Eastern time, so I'll just talk a little bit about that. Then in the third segment, we're going to talk a little bit about some Cavs drama because Darius Garland finally addresses some sort of trade rumors that were going on. We're just going to talk a little bit about that. And then in the fourth segment, I'm going to talk about Stephon Castle and his injury and what exactly that could mean for the San Antonio Spurs in going into the future. But before I get into this segment, I also like to remind everyone that we also have a special fifth segment that I reveal at the end of the fourth segment. So be sure to stay tuned for that and figure out what that is. And also to remember to use the link in the description to get your comments recognized or the link displayed below the ticker on every show segment. The link is GSMCpodcast.net. It really helps the show. It makes it much more interactive between myself and you guys. Once again, the link is GSMCpodcast.net. And without further ado, let's go right ahead and talk about Jalen Brunson taking his huge pay cut. Now, we know that LeBron, he took a pay cut, right? But it was a tiny pay cut. It was like, a $3 million difference, right? Jalen Brunson decided to be like, all right, you know what? This is how you take a pay cut. And decided to sign a contract for 4 years that is worth $157 million. Now, the reason why this was such a huge pay cut is because he was eligible to sign a 5-year, $269 million contract, which, again, that's almost $100 million more than what he could have been making, right? Like, this is a huge, huge pay cut. Or, according to Woj, it's $113 million less guaranteed than he's eligible to receive in the previous contract that I mentioned, where he could have signed for 5 years and $269 million. So the repercussion of Brunson choosing the 4-year instead of the max deal, which was going to have him there for 5 years, is that the Knicks, they now have the ability to keep the core roster intact, right? They have the ability to keep their team. So when I previously thought that Randall, I didn't think he was going to be on the team after this season, mainly because OG signed a huge amount of money, and I could only have imagined just how much money Jalen Brunson was willing to sign. But this pay cut now sort of changes that perspective. So the rest of the team that had the Villanova boys with Jalen Brunson, Bridges, and DiVincenzo and Josh Hart, along with Julius Randle and the rest of the other players that came off the bench, now they sort of get to remain intact for this upcoming season, while also still giving the Knicks some sort of flexibility to be able to improve their roster and try and get some other kind of free agents, or maybe even work on some trades. Then again, don't really know how they're going to work on some trades without having draft capital, because they used all of that draft capital for getting Mikal Bridges. But aside from that, this is a huge win for the New York Knicks. This is great for the team. The only person that's really taking a huge hit is Jalen Brunson, and the fact that he's not going to be making $100 million more than what he could. But, in my opinion, Jalen should never have to pay any taxes in New York. He should never have to pay for a meal. He should never have to pay for housing. He shouldn't have to pay for anything. None whatsoever. He shouldn't pay for anything in New York. Now, the deal will cost Brunson $37.1 million over the next 3 years, and it comes with a 4th-year player option, and that would set up Brunson to recoup the rest of the $113 million on a 4-year, $323 million extension in 2028, or a new 5-year, $418 million deal in 2029. Now, I'm sure you guys are wondering, whoa, where in the world is all of this money coming from? Well, it's with the new NBA deal that I mentioned on a previous podcast before. Now, this deal is supposed to increase the salary cap tremendously for a lot of teams. And teams that have the money to spend like that, they're most likely going to spend it on their key players. So contracts that we've seen over this free agency, like Franz Wagner's contract that I mentioned before, they're probably going to be obsolete compared to the other contracts that are going to be signed by these big-time players, because they're expecting the salary cap to increase tremendously with this deal. Now, more tweets coming in from Woj. The repercussions of Brunson choosing the 4-year deal over the 5-year is just the ability to keep making roster moves to close the gap on a championship, and the cap savings that the Knicks... So, if Brunson waited until 2025 to sign his extension, he would have made $46 million in 2025, $50 million in 2026, $53 million in 2027, $57 million in 2028, and $61 million in 2029, which would have been a total of $269 million, on his contract, right? Now, the extension that he signed which was totaling up to $156 million, he'll be making $34 million in 2025, $37 million in 2026, $40 million in 2027, and $43 million in 2028 with a player option. Now, obviously, at least, in my opinion, I don't think he's going to be losing that much sleep by not making as much money as he could be making, because, $34 million, that's still a lot of money over a year. Again, I'm just talking from the perspective of, being a regular college kid, and obviously the perspective of being an NBA player that has all this talent is going to be incredibly different. But aside from that, I don't really think he's going to be losing much sleep. So the Knicks would essentially be saving on $11.45 million in 2025. They would be saving $12.3 million in 2026 and $13.2 million in 2027, 2028, which in total would mean that they will be saving $37 million in this new contract that he decided to sign, right? So Brunson will have 10 YOS, whatever the world that means, and he's eligible to sign a 4-year, $323 million extension in 2027, which, again, might I remind you, is way more than what Jalen Brown was making when Jalen Brown's big contract was the biggest contract in the history of the NBA. All of these biggest contracts in the history of the NBA, they're all going to change over the years with this new TV deal. I'm so certain that that's what's going to happen. So he's this is just a huge win for the New York Knicks. When it seemed like they weren't going to be able to get more talent based off of OG's, huge contract. But aside from that, this is just great for New York. Now, in my opinion, I think it should have been the other way around. I think that OG should have been making the amount of money that Jalen's making right now, and Jalen should be making the amount of money that OG is making right now. But whatever it takes to keep the team together, whatever it takes for them to win, I'm pretty sure that Brunson is all for it. And on top of that, it's not like he's not going to be making money from other type of, you know, sponsorship deals that New York is going to be loaded with, and all of the other sponsorship deals that he already has. Like, I mean, he's just going to gain more and more. So it's not like he's going to, again, it's not like he's going to be losing sleep. And on top of that, like, a lot of people are going to be like, oh, well, he's going to have a difficult time paying for all of these other things in New York because things are getting more expensive. But the way I see it, he has his four college, or three of, I guess you could say, yeah, he has his three college friends over on the exact same roster, right? And really, like, if there's something that needs to be covered, I'm pretty sure those guys got him. Like, I wouldn't be surprised if those guys, they went through thick and thin. They've been in the same college together, and it's like, there's no better feeling than actually doing what you like with people that you like. So obviously that's a sacrifice that he was willing to take in order to keep the roster together. And I would be very surprised if the rest of his teammates that have been teammates since college would be like, if Jalen Brunson, let's say Jalen Brunson, he needs a hand in money, which is very rare for an NBA player to need a hand in money. I'm sure his former college friends, Mikal Bridges, DiVincenzo, or Josh Hart, I'm sure they'd all be like, yeah, we got you, this, that, and the other. Even though they're not going to be making as much as him, they got him. They're college friends. Like, that's just what you do. That's what friends are for. And like, it's really like, now the biggest challenge is if this pay cut was for nothing. Like, now they got to win. So, as the Lakers would say, it's winning time. But with that out of the way, like, that will be it for the first segment. And so we will go ahead and go into the second segment, where I'm going to be talking about Team USA and, you know, the matchup that's going to be happening tonight, or tomorrow, I guess you could say. It's a little weird, but we're going to talk about that. They're going to play in, actually, you know what, I'll explain all of that in the second segment. So it'll be right after this short break, but be sure to stay tuned.
I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind? Please, Lord, give me a sign, a sign. I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind? Please, Lord, give me a sign, a sign.
I wanna be the greatest. Everybody on the fake shit. I look around and feel like everybody is the fakest. I make this every day and I'm impatient, hoping one day I blow up from the basement. Statement, the top is so vacant. I don't hear shit that I think is amazing. Waiting for my day when I'm playing sold out shows for 1,000 faces. Hey, give me that crown, get in my way and to be put down. It ain't your place, all this my town. If I want that shit, then I'll get it right now. I'm losing it, the noose it fits, I'm losing shit, a stupid myth. You choose to live or choose to dip, you choose to fight or lose your grip and lose a gift. Oh.
I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind? Please, Lord, give me a sign, a sign. I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind?
And we are back with the second segment of the GSMC Basketball Podcast, presented by the GSMC Sports Network. And in the second segment, we're going to be talking about Team USA, about their whole roster change, and about the matchup that's going to be happening later on tonight, later on tomorrow, whatever you want to call it. But before I begin, I would like to remind everybody to please go ahead and use the link in the description to get your comments recognized, or the link displayed below the ticker on every show segment. That is GSMCpodcast.net. It really helps the show. It makes it much more interactive between myself and you guys. Once again, the link is GSMCpodcast.net. And without further ado, we can go right ahead and go into the next segment, which is going to be about Team USA. Now, I keep saying, like, today, tomorrow, with the game that's going to be happening, but really it's happening at 12 o'clock midnight. So technically it's happening tomorrow, but at the same time it's also happening tonight. So whichever one of you guys want to call it. But they're going to be playing in Abu Dhabi, which is why the game is being scheduled so late at 12 o'clock. and they play the Australian national team. So the Australian national team is composed of players like Matthew Dellavedova, Dante Exum, Dyson Daniels, Josh Giddey, Joe Ingles, Josh Green, and Patty Mills. Now, those are the guys that are, famous for playing a lot of NBA minutes. They also have several other players on the roster that are just, what I guess you could say, they're just like, players that are on the Australian roster, but they don't have a job in the NBA. So there's no real, I'll bring attention to them. There's Will McNay, Jack McVeigh, Duop Reith, let's see, there's Nick Kay, Jock Landale, and who else? And that's pretty much it in terms of the players that aren't in the NBA. So it's like they have, well, they don't really have, I guess you could say, superstar talent like Team USA. They do have talent. Like Patty Mills, when he was on Australia, I remember watching him in FIBA. I believe it was in 2021. He was a monster. Like, that dude was ridiculous in a system that works, in a system that fits with him. He was fantastic. Now, obviously, I'm here to talk about Team USA more than I am to talk about Australia, and there is going to be a starting lineup change. Now, for one, Anthony Edwards is expected to start in this game, so I'm assuming he's going to start over Devin Booker, because I think that is a much better idea than to have Devin Booker in the starting lineup. They actually have a defender, a competent defender that can also play some really good offense, and Anthony Edwards is also going to play alongside, Jason Tatum, who was another player that came off of the bench in the previous game, and he had some really good production coming in off of the bench. So there is no Kevin Durant starting, which is, it's a bit of a bummer, but I'm pretty sure this is because Team USA wants to make sure that Kevin Durant is healthy enough in the games that really matter. I'm very positive that he's going to be starting once the Olympics actually kicks off and things like that, or tips off, I guess you could say. And really, that's the only reason why Jason Tatum is starting over someone like Kevin Durant. Now, I don't really have a problem with this. I said that I wanted Jason Tatum in the starting lineup, or Anthony Edwards even in the starting lineup. Again, I said previously that I would have preferred to see Anthony Edwards come off of the bench, because he could be that really good scoring option that comes off of the bench along with the rest of the players. But seeing him in the starting lineup, I'm not really that mad at it either way, because he is a very competent player, and while at the same time, while he is competent on the offensive side, he's also extremely competent on the defensive side, which is something that the starting lineup previously didn't have. They really lacked in the defensive category. Like, they had Drew Holiday in the starting lineup for whatever reason, and he is a defender. He's known for his defense, but, I mean, really, putting him at the small forward as opposed to someone who is 6'6", Anthony Edwards, it's like, what in the world are you guys doing? That was sort of my thought process when going into the starting lineup. But I do sort of understand that I'm pretty sure, I am 90% sure, that the reason why Drew and Devin Booker were starting was in response to the starting lineup that Canada was bringing out, because the small forward for Canada, I believe, was Dylan Brooks, who's also he's rather short compared to the average small forward, and they had a lot of guards out in the matchup between Canada versus Team USA. So I'm pretty sure that the guard matchup was in response to Canada's guard matchup, but that's just me. Now, Team Australia is a much taller team than the Canadian team in terms of the other positions aside from the center, right? Dyson Daniels, he's rather tall. Josh Giddey is also a much taller option, as, he plays guard, but he's actually 6'7", so it's he is a really tall player, so you need tall players to match up against those other tall players. Then there's Joe Ingles, and then there's also Josh Green. Again, it's a really tall lineup, aside from Patty Mills, who's I believe 6'2", 6'1", however you want to call it. But I'm pretty sure that these starting lineups are in response to the lineups that the national teams are sending out. And I don't really have a problem with that if that's how Team USA wants to match up. If they want to match up position per position, I don't really have a problem with it, because the real challenge is making sure that everyone is able to have minutes on the court and at the same time be able to do stuff without the ball in their hands, this, that, and the other. It's really difficult to get the chemistry down on a team that's full of so many superstar talent players, right? Now, the only big problem that I have with this roster switch up, again, I have no problem with Anthony Edwards. I have no problem with Jason Tatum. Those guys are great in the starting lineup. And if you want to start them over Kevin Durant, I think that's like a really big, like, ooh, that's crazy. But I would understand why if it meant that, the matchups would be better suited for you. However, the only big problem that I have is that Joel Embiid is still starting. I don't know why Joel Embiid is still starting after his horrible performance that he had in the first game. Like, the other two guards, I understand why. Like, Drew Holiday and Devin Booker, I understand why you're benching them for someone like Jason Tatum and Anthony Edwards, especially when you take into consideration the roster that they're going up against. But why is Joel Embiid starting? Now, a lot of people are going to be like, oh, because he's the best center in the league. It doesn't matter if you're the best center in a league that helps you. Like, I'm sorry to say it, but Joel Embiid gets aided a lot in the NBA by these referees. In fact, there was a clip that I saw, as I was watching the game as well, there was also a clip that I saw where Joel Embiid, he literally does this when he's trying to shoot the ball, and guess what? The ref doesn't blow his whistle, and he's complaining, and I'm just like, why? Why are you bothering trying to get a foul? Just go for a bucket. You're so much he was so much taller than everyone else on the Canadian team, and he just wasn't taking advantage of his size. He wasn't shooting over the defenders like we see him usually do. He was trying to go for fouls. Like, why are you doing that? Why are you doing that? And not to mention, the second Anthony Davis stepped onto the court, Team USA played far better than when Joel Embiid was on the court. Like, the impact was almost immediately when Anthony Davis stepped foot on the court. Like, he put up a double-double despite, coming off of the bench. Meanwhile, Joel Embiid fouled out despite being a starter. And I just watching him play infuriates me. It really infuriates me because you can't be that tall and just baiting to try and get foul calls, because that's essentially what he does. That's how he plays, that's what he does, and it's really difficult to hide it because it's just the truth. Like, I don't want to sound like, a hater that just, oh, Joel Embiid, he flops all the time. That's what he does. That, like, every time I see him, he tries to draw a foul, and I'm just like, no, go for a bucket. That was the big difference between, like, how a lot of these players actually played on the roster. Like, I saw Jason Tatum, when he was going up to the basket, he went up strong. When Anthony Edwards was going to the basket, he went up strong. He didn't try to do this or that to try and get a foul call. They went up strong towards the basket, which, helped them win the game. Especially, like, and Anthony Davis as well. For someone that has the reputation of, being made out of glass, that's what a lot of people say about Anthony Davis. I personally don't think that, but a lot of people say that about him. And for having that reputation and still going up strong and, finishing around the basket, it's like they clearly understand that it's a completely different game. And it doesn't matter. Yeah, sure, maybe he gets hit, but you don't have to exaggerate it or over-exaggerate it like that. Like, you're so much taller than everyone else on the court. Why are you over-exaggerating that? But that's just enough with the Embiid, talk, because, I really don't feel like he should be in the starting lineup. But let me know what you guys think in the comments. Do you think that Joel Embiid in the starting lineup is fine, or do you think that he should be replaced, like how I think he should be replaced, with Anthony Davis? Because on top of his playstyle and his foul baiting just not being something that I like watching, his overall playstyle, like his isolation type of playstyle, I don't think it's that effective. I mean, we rarely see Joel Embiid run off of a pick and roll. Most of the time, when he runs the screen and he sets a screen, he tries to get the switch and he tries to go into the post. Now, there's nothing wrong with going into the post, but with a roster that's constructed like this, that has so many players that are just, incredibly difficult to guard, it only makes sense that the big man would try to pick and try to roll, because it would create better looks for themselves going towards the basket, as well as better looks for their teammates when the help coverage comes. Because I noticed it the second Anthony Edwards and AD were on the court. Anthony Edwards was, demanding double coverage because he's such an efficient scorer in the mid-range, and it drawed so much attention to him that Anthony Davis was wide open in the paint. Like, obviously, that's not going to happen every single play, but I really think that play style better helps the rest of the players on the roster that can do a lot with the ball, as opposed to just giving it to Joel Embiid and just pray to God, pray that he, gets something out of that basket, like gets a basket out of the offense that he generates, and hope to God that he gets a foul, because that's really like, I don't like it. But aside from that, we are out of time for this second segment. So now we will go ahead and go into the third segment, which is going to be about Darius Garland and some more Cavs drama, because Darius finally addresses some of the trade rumors that were going around over the season. I'll do a little recap of exactly what was going on right after this short break, so be sure to stay tuned.
Looking for your daily fix of sports talk without having to pay for it? GSMC Sports Network is available on YouTube. Just search GSMC Sports Network. Get your fix of daily sports talk shows on YouTube, absolutely free. NFL, college football, NBA, MLB, MMA, UFC, fantasy football, and so much more. GSMC Sports Network has shows running all day long, with new sports shows starting every 2 hours. Just like on your favorite cable sports channel, except GSMC Sports Network is absolutely free. Just search GSMC Sports Network on YouTube to catch one of your new favorite shows, like the GSMC College Football Podcast, Chip Shot Football Podcast, Hoops and Heels Women's Sports Podcast, GSMC Basketball Podcast, and so many more. Check it out for yourself. GSMC Sports Network, now available on YouTube absolutely free. Search GSMC Sports Network on YouTube right now.
And we are back with the third segment of the GSMC Basketball Podcast, presented by the GSMC Sports Network. Excuse me, those hiccups were random. And in this third segment, we are going to be talking about the Cavs drama that's going on. Now, the reason why I call it Cavs drama is because, that's just, I feel like it has a very nice, it has a good ring to it. And on top of that, there was a lot of drama going into the offseason with Darius Garland, the starting lineup, Donovan Mitchell, the coach, all that stuff, right? So let's do a little bit of a recap on exactly what the Cavs drama had, what it meant, this, that, and the other. So we'll go right ahead and talk about the Cavs drama. So if you guys remember previously on several other podcasts that I was doing, let me just go ahead and pull up the article real quick. All right, here we go. So Donovan Mitchell, he was supposed to sign, well, he actually did. He ended up signing a max contract with the Cavs, right? Now, there were rumors and there was huge speculation that when Donovan Mitchell was going to sign that max contract with the Cavs, Darius Garland was going to request a trade. That was one of the biggest talks in the offseason. And it's like that sort of surrounded the entire, speculation and the entire Cavs drama around with the roster, how the Cavs are going to maintain their overall roster, how much money they're willing to give Donovan, are the Cavs going to sign Donovan? And it was really like, the Cavs needed to choose. Like, do you take Donovan? Do you take Darius Garland? Do you blow up the rest of the roster? Do you get rid of just the two of them and try to build around somebody else? Or do you do something completely different, right? That was like the biggest problem the biggest problem with the the Cavs and the drama. And hold on just one second. And just the entirety of the organization, right? That was the biggest problem, because it's you were in a little bit of a debacle, I guess you could say. And it's you had to choose, and no organization is going to want to be put in that situation where it's you have to choose between one or the other when both of them could work really well. So Darius Garland, he finally broke the silence on the trade rumors in the offseason, and he addressed these rumors by saying on a May report from The Athletic. Now, they suggested that if Donovan Mitchell were to sign a contract extension, Darius Garland's agent, Rich Paul, was expected to have a conversation with the Cavs about possibly finding a new home. This is coming in from an article from Yardbreaker, right? Now, Garland himself broke the silence and said, "I don't want to be traded. Those are just rumors." So, sources tell Fedor that Paul and the Cavs' head of basketball operations, Kobe Altman, have spoken this offseason, but there has been no indication that Garland's camp is seeking a change of scenery. And the team has made it clear it has no interest in moving the former All-Star. If you guys remember previously, on previous podcasts, I was talking about how, okay, well, the Cavs aren't interested in moving any of their players. How is that going to fare with Darius Garland and Donovan, who don't seem to really want to play with each other, or at least Darius doesn't want to play with Donovan? At least that's what it seemed like before. So now, according to this article, according to Fedor, Garland was thrilled for Mitchell when his backcourt teammate signed a lucrative new deal with Cleveland and was excited about the team's hiring of Kenny Atkinson as its new head coach. Garland has been in Las Vegas participating in some on-court workouts and meeting with Atkinson during a dinner on Friday. The two discussed offensive schemes and sets as well as the 24-year-old's role, at least according to Fedor. "It sounds really good," Garland said, "and a lot of the spacing and a lot of room for me and Don and all the other guys to be able to thrive." Atkinson, who has spoken about Garland in glowing terms since being hired on Cleveland, shares the exact same enthusiasm, quoting, "I can't wait to work with him." Atkinson said the Cavs star guards, I was a point guard and that's the quarterback. Those guys are running the show, and it's such a huge position in this league. I identify with them. Huge fan of Darius, always been a fan. Underrated passer. I don't think he gets enough credit for the feel. Then Donovan, we all know, he's the real deal. The great ones have different type of work ethic. He's wired a little bit differently. Now, again, Garland had a down year in 2023-2024 as his averages of 18 points per game and 6 assists per game and his 44% from the field, 37% from 3, and 83% from the line were all below his career rates, but that was less about sharing the ball with Mitchell and more about a handful of other factors, including injuries, a fractured jaw, and the weight loss that resulted from drinking out of a straw for over a month. Now, Garland's grandmother also passed away, according to Fedor, which led to him leaving the team on off days multiple times. So it seems that, at least, according to this article, that a lot of the problems with Garland were more off the court stuff than on the court stuff. Now, another article also is claiming the exact same thing, that Darius doesn't want to be traded, which is just a very good thing for the Cavs and the roster, so they can maintain their core, their valuable players, and they can, keep trying to win the championship in a heavily stacked Eastern Conference. And to be honest, I don't think that that's going to happen. I really don't think that they're going to win anything with this roster, especially with the Knicks getting better and, the Celtics just being a powerhouse of a team already. They seem to be fighting against the current, but aside from that, this is really the best chance that the team has to win anything. Like, unfortunate as it is, their best chances to win are with a team that I just don't think has the ability to win. But that's just me. Now, according to Garland said that all of the off-the-court stuff that was going on, it was a lot. That's what he told Fedor. Sometimes you just have to go through it. Always bumps in the road. This was a big speed bump. It was really tough last year. It was definitely a learning experience for me. Just tried to stay mentally locked in and try to keep my head up and keep a smile on my face. I just had to stay mentally strong while going through a tough time in my life and having to fight adversity. Now, obviously, we know that fighting adversity is like the ultimate storyline and the ultimate script writing to a successful team. But no. No. That's not happening. This roster isn't going... It would take a miracle. It would take LeBron James suddenly deciding to join the Cavs for the Cavs to even have a slight chance of making it out of the Eastern Conference, in my opinion. Obviously, like, I could be wrong. Let me know what you guys think in the comments. But with the Celtics being as good as they are, and with the Knicks only getting better as the years progress, while the Cavs are just, staying that same mediocre team, I don't really think the Cavs have that much of a chance. But with that, we are out of time for this third segment. So now we will go ahead and go into this fourth segment, where I talk about my hiccups and Stephon Castle being injured in the Summer League and what that could mean for the Spurs going into the regular season. So I'll be right back after this short break. Be sure to stay tuned.
For the best and latest podcasts available anywhere, go to the podcast app on your cell phone and type in GSMC to access free content-rich podcasts on health and wellness, book reviews, sports, entertainment, relationships, social media, movies, technology, finance, and even weird news. Subscribe and download the GSMC Podcast Network's family of shows, available everywhere podcasts are found.
And we are back with the fourth segment of the GSMC Basketball Podcast presented by the GSMC Sports Network. And in this fourth segment, we are going to be talking about Stephon Castle and his injuries in the Summer League, which is, it's a little bit unfortunate that a player gets injured. Like, I really don't like... It's really like a sad sight to see. Like, their injuries, they always plague the league. They always plague a lot of these players, and they always, they ruin what could have been. Like, there are a lot of what-if stories based off of players being injured and things like that. But Stephon Castle, he played on UConn. He won back-to-back titles, and he is primarily known as a very competent defender in this draft. Now, should the San Antonio Spurs be worried about not having Stephon Castle for their first year? That's really the big enough question, right? Now, the Spurs, they firmly believe that they have their point guard of the future to pair alongside Victor, and this comes in the form of the number 4 overall pick, Stephon Castle. Now, I really would have wished that they would have kept that other player that they drafted 8 overall, as opposed to just immediately trading him. But at this point, the Spurs, they'll need to wait a little bit, unfortunately, due to this player getting injured. And he actually showed a lot of promise in the Summer League. I believe in the last game he played, he had like 22 points. And again, like that's pretty solid coming in from a point guard. Now, again, it's obviously the Summer League, so too early to tell, but he can definitely be a player that brings tremendous value to this team. Now, Spurs insider Tom Osborne of San Antonio Express News reported on Sunday that the team has decided to pull Castle out of the remainder of the Summer League, and this is after the 6'6" point guard sustained a wrist injury during their last game. Castle is out for the remainder of the Summer League after suffering a right wrist sprain when he fell in Saturday's win over Portland. Spurs say it's a minor injury, but Spurs aren't taking any chances with the 4th overall pick. This is a shame, I'm still reading off of the article. This is a shame considering how impressive Castle has been in the Summer League. On Saturday against the Blazers, he logged 22 points. So I was right, he did log 22 points. But he shot 8 for 21 from the field, which is kind of gross. But, 22 points that's pretty solid. He ended up getting more points than shot attempts, but still pretty gross. Now, to go along with the 22 points, he also ended up getting 5 rebounds, 4 assists, and a steal, along with 2 threes to help lead San Antonio to an 83-77 win. According to the report, the injury is considered minor, which means that there should be no cause for concern. The Spurs are merely erring on the side of caution on their prized guard as they should. So I don't really think this is something that, the Spurs have to worry about. And on top of that, even if he doesn't play, the Spurs, they also recently got Chris Paul on the roster. Now, I feel like I don't see Chris Paul as being, a starter, especially with his old age. However, I could be wrong. I could really, really be wrong about that, because Chris Paul, while he is old age also comes experience. And he has a lot of experience running the pick and roll. He has a lot of experience setting up teammates for open shots. And while he is old, he still has a very solid mid-range pull-up that he loves to use. And really, he's just a very smart player overall. Now, think about him paired up alongside Victor. I mean, DeAndre Jordan, I don't know if you guys remember DeAndre Jordan, but when he was on the Clippers, he made the first team All-NBA. He made the All-NBA first team, and majority of that reason is because of Chris Paul and his ability to set up DeAndre Jordan with perfect lobs. And on top of that, DJ was also a very good rebounder and a pretty competent defender as well. And that all of that, half of the reason why he was so successful on the offensive side is because of Chris Paul and his pick and roll. I mean, Lob City, that was a thing, and it all started with Chris Paul. And the amount of value that Chris Paul brings to a team should never go underestimated. In fact, every single year that Chris Paul has joined a team, their win percentage has increased dramatically. It happens almost every single time. So just imagine, the amount of lobs that he's going to throw to Victor. Someone who is 7'4", and he can easily just throw it up there, and the guy's just going to catch it over everyone. It's you cannot catch the ball over someone like Victor. It's literally impossible. Now, I know what you guys are thinking. Oh, if it's so easy, then why didn't the rest of his team do that? Well, the rest of his team was full of a bunch of rookies and a bunch of players that had an ego. That's really what I feel like. I don't know what it is, but it's there were a lot of times last year where Victor was wide open under the basket, but his teammates just refused to pass him the ball. Refuse. And it's how could you miss someone that's 7'4"? But now that the Spurs, that's who I mean, now that they have a competent guard and a guard that actually has competent vision on the court, I think it's going to be very dangerous, and it could really help Victor Wembanyama's development, on top of also being able to help Stephon Castle's development. One of the best things about having veterans on your team is that you get to sort of teach the younger players exactly how it's done. And the younger players, they can learn a lot easier from watching or from learning from the vets. That's one of the more iconic things, and one of the reasons why having a vet on your team is so popular. And you should always have at least that one veteran on the team that can help the team in some regard, just based off of their knowledge of the game, because they've been playing in the league longer than you have. Experience outranks almost everything, right? And you can never have too much experience. And a player that's been playing that's almost as long as LeBron James is going to have a lot of experience. So I think this could be a good thing for both Victor as well as Stephon Castle. Now, if Stephon doesn't play that much because of, his injury, then, I don't really expect, I don't expect Chris Paul to start, but let me know in the comments what you guys think. Would you guys rather start Chris Paul over Stephon Castle, or would you flip-flop between the two of them and figure out which of them is starting? Let's say maybe you start by starting Chris Paul, and then when Stephon gets in a rhythm, you start by starting Stephon. But let me know in the comments what you guys think of that. I personally don't think that Chris Paul should be starting. I would much rather like to see him in the role of being that veteran player that teaches all the other younger players exactly and shows them the ropes and things of that nature. Now, again, like I said, this injury, it isn't supposed to be something major for Stephon, and it isn't supposed to be something that's, going to hinder him for the rest of the season. So I don't really feel like this should be something that a lot of Spurs fans should worry about. And as long as you have Victor healthy, really, you don't got to worry about a thing. But that's really all that I have to talk about on this fourth segment. It's a little bit shorter than the rest of the other segments, but it's really just updating everyone on, Victor and his teammates, and really, Stephon and just, his ability to play for the team. So with this out of the way, we can go right ahead into the fifth segment where I talk about some comments that Stephen A. Smith made about Ben Simmons. And I'm all for, talking about Ben Simmons. You guys know how I feel about Ben Simmons. Urgh! And we're going to go ahead and talk about what he had to say about his contract. And an agent actually responded to Stephen A. Smith about Ben Simmons and his comments towards Ben Simmons. So I'm going to talk a little bit about that drama and what that means right after this short break. Be sure to stay tuned. And we are back to the fifth and the final segment of the GSMC Basketball Podcast, presented by the GSMC Sports Network. And in this final segment, we are going to be looking at some of the comments that Stephen A. Smith had to make about Ben Simmons, as well as, Jimmy Butler's agent responding back towards the comments that Stephen A. made about Ben Simmons. Now, one of the things that, makes Stephen A., obviously, that's not Stephen A. Smith or Ben Simmons. There we go. Obviously, someone as, with the big name as Stephen A. Smith, it doesn't really matter what he says on the internet. Most of the people are either going to find him funny, most people are going to find memes to make about him in the future, and it's really difficult to cancel somebody that's as popular and as recognizable as Stephen A., right? Like, people like listening to him talk, people like listening to his opinions, and sometimes his opinions are a little bit extreme. Like, for example, what he had to say about Ben Simmons. Now, he remarked on his, I believe it was his podcast, he said that Ben Simmons is lucky he's not in prison for theft. And his choice of Miami as a rehab site showed he doesn't love the game. Now, that's what Stephen A. Smith said over on his podcast, right? Or on a podcast, I should say. It was called The OG Show. So yeah, it was a podcast, right? Now, Jimmy Butler's agent also decided to clap back at this. Now, the issue started when the analyst blasted Ben Simmons for his choice of rehab location in Miami. On top of it, he also claimed that the Nets star should be in prison for theft, a not-so-subtle jab at Simmons' lack of time on the court, contrasting his $177 million contract, right? Now, as a Nets fan, I'm not going to give my opinions on what I think about this comment because, I personally think it's egregious to say something like that, on air and on a podcast, but I'm not going to say that he's not insane for saying this because Ben Simmons doesn't play a game. He doesn't. He does not like playing. I don't know what it is, but ever since that one little playoff series, he does not play games. It's like, why? You are 6'10". You weigh 200 and something pounds of pure muscle, and you don't play. Why? 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 It's not like, it's not like he's cripplingly injured like T-Mac or something like that. And no disrespect to T-Mac whatsoever, but like T-Mac was plagued with a lot of injuries. He had a lot of back injuries and he had a lot of ankle injuries, and that really prevented him from being a very talented player in the NBA. But it's not like he was faking those injuries or things of that nature. It's not like he was purposely sitting out in, certain games where like, he could legitimately play in, right? He was one of those players where it was like, you have to fight in order to keep him off of the court. And that was the mentality that he showed. But Ben Simmons, on the other hand, let's face it. I mean, at this point, it's starting to get ridiculous. Like, before, you could make the argument, oh, it was back spasms and this and that. But now it just seems ridiculous, just the amount of games that he's sitting out. Because it's like, I remember this one point where in the postseason, against the Boston Celtics, it was regarded as, before Game 4, everyone thought that Ben Simmons was going to play. It was highly likely that Ben Simmons was going to suit up for Game 4. Highly likely, highly likely, right? But then, the second Game 4, the day of Game 4 came. The second that day came, all of a sudden, a report comes in saying that Ben Simmons is not suiting up. Ben Simmons is not eligible. Ben Simmons is this, that, and the other. Now, it completely contradicted all of the reports before that, where it was saying Ben Simmons would be eligible to play for Game 4. Ben Simmons is probably going to suit up for Game 4. All of the sources that said Ben Simmons was going to play in Game 4, all of a sudden, it just flipped on its head and said Ben Simmons is not eligible to play for Game 4 for whatever reason. I don't even remember what the reason was, because to me, it just felt like he was scared. Like, he is scared. It doesn't make any sense to me how someone who is 6'10" is scared to pick up and dribble a basketball. It doesn't. And, the comments of highway robbery, as Stephen A. would like to call it, I wouldn't use those words, obviously. But, and you know what, I'm not even going to, talk about those comments in general, really. Now, Jimmy Butler's agent, because, Ben Simmons, he has the same butler. He has the same butler. He has the same agent as Jimmy Butler. Now, he said, he made responses, and he had some response to say about these claims. And he said, quite frankly, I think Stephen A. is an idiot, and I only wish he still had his TV show so I could sit in his audience and voice my opinion to him while he attempted to do this job. Alas, it got canceled, Butler's agent told Nets Daily. And Nets Daily reported this in a tweet. Ben Simmons, obviously, this is just the act of, your agent defending the player. But Ben Simmons has only played 57 games in the last 2 seasons. This is worse than Kyrie. And the injury, it keeps, being reported that injuries are plaguing his career. I don't see him getting injured. I don't see him hurt at all. And in the offseason, he's targeting a return to full fitness with a personal camp in Miami. This is the same guy that went on vacation because, he didn't want to play for the Sixers because he was sensitive. His feelings were hurt after he was scoring 0 points in the postseason. Yeah, you should feel hurt. You should feel bad. And it's I don't understand why he's not one of those players that's because if this was someone like Kobe, if this was someone like Michael Jordan, if this was someone like any sort of all-star caliber player, they would have taken that performance, they would have remembered that performance, and they would have worked hard to make sure that performance never happens again. But his response is nope, I'm just not going to play. I'm going to sit. I'm just not going to do anything. They don't need me, this, that, and the other. It's annoying, and it's really I cannot stand players and athletes that have that diva mentality, because that's really what it is. And it's really sad because he is 6'10". He is such a gifted player, and he just doesn't play. The biggest problem that I had with Kyrie when he was on the Nets was that he didn't want to play. And now there's another player on the team that doesn't want to play. Why? Now, the agency partner between, Jimmy Butler and Ben Simmons is yet to start his off-season prep. The Heat forward instead opted for a tour in Europe. Jimmy Butler, that's Jimmy Butler that this article is talking about. Now, it's really like, I guess this is just a common thing for this man and his agents, or this man and his players, I guess you could say, just the rest of them just, leaving and going over to this place and that place just to, explore and do whatever it needs that they need to do to rehab. But that's really all that I have on the comments with Stephen A. Let me know what you guys think. Do you guys agree with his comments on Ben Simmons being lucky that he's not in prison for theft? Or do you think that the comments are a little bit extreme and you're just not a fan of Stephen A, right? But with that, we are out of time for this 5th segment, and that is the end of the podcast. So thank you for tuning in to the GSMC Basketball Podcast, presented by the GSMC Sports Network. Your support means a lot to us, so please remember to subscribe to the show, leave a positive review. It really does make a difference. We also invite you to follow us on Facebook, Twitter, TikTok, and Instagram for more content and updates. And as usual, please remember to use the link in the description to get your comments recognized, or the link displayed below the ticker on every show segment. That is gsmcpodcast.net. It really helps the show, makes it much more interactive between myself and you guys. Thank you so much for tuning in. I am your host, Nelson. Have a wonderful day, and as always, take care.
Let's go. I wake up to a little bit of drool on my pillow, feel like it's gonna be a bad day. Yeah, I'm tired of shit, and the coffee ain't hit yet, damn, ain't that great.